Hello and welcome to another CK3 Dev Diary video. This time we're on the 19th Dev Diary, Factions and Civil Wars. So how about enough dilly-dally and let's just get into it. Hello kings and queens, dukes and duchesses. Is duchesses actually what it's supposed to be? Duchesses. I guess it is. I'm back with another Dev Diary, and today we're going to be talking about factions and civil wars in Crusader Kings 3. Much like in CK2, vassals who are unhappy with the current state of affairs in the realm will create a faction that other vassals can then join. Factions that grow large enough will eventually deliver an ultimatum to their liege, demanding certain concessions in exchange for continued peace. So now we have the anatomy of a faction. Faction to install Duke Robert of Burgundy on the French throne. You've got the discontent meter, and if it hits full, I guess that's when the faction explodes. And then the military power, and I guess this might be where your military power lies. So at the moment, this faction is, with 3 people only, stronger than what you've got yourself. A screenshot showing the claimant faction with the faction members' discontent and military power displayed. Lovely. All factions have a military power rating, which is a ratio between the combined military strength of all members and the military strength of their liege. Factions also have a discontent score, which gauges how close the faction is to sending their ultimatum. Factions will begin accruing discontent once their military power goes over a certain threshold, typically 80%. Well, that looks like a lot less than 80%, so I don't think that's what that is. That looks about, 40%, something like that. And then this 96%, not sure what that is either. 96% of the liege. Maybe this is the bar that they're talking about here. Maybe that is the certain threshold, and it's just the threshold has been lowered significantly because of reasons like, maybe because this guy is really, really pissed off. That's why it's gone down, perhaps, I'm not sure. Stronger factions acquire discontent rapidly in an attempt to seize the moment, while weaker factions hem and haw a little in the hopes that more supporters will join their cause. Either way, once discontent reaches 100%, the faction will soon deliver their ultimatum. At that point, their liege must either accept their demands or fight all joined faction members in a civil war. So, civil wars here in Italy. That looks very strange, actually, the map. I'm not sure I quite like the colour of the border, what's going on here. I'm not sure that looks really that good, honestly. So, screenshot of the map showing several faction members at war with their liege. Who is the player? Is that what that's showing? I guess I like the banner with the flames on it. I think that looks really, really cool. But this border is just not looking good. That does not look good at all. But this flame behind the banner, I like that a lot. That's quite nice. It might be something to do with civil war, or it might be that's what appears behind any banner that you're at war with, or maybe that's what the swords at the top would signify. Maybe, I'm not sure. Unlike in CK2, when a civil war declared, faction members do not form a new temporary realm. While they nominally remain vassals of their liege, they'll immediately stop providing taxes and levy to them, and their liege will lose access to certain powers, such as imprisonment. During a civil war, the faction members turn hostile to both their liege and all non-faction vassals, though they will focus on fighting their liege. The exact war goal varies depending on the faction type, but both sides earn war score by defeating hostile armies and sieging down hostile provinces. So I guess this is sort of a way to alleviate the problem where a civil war would fire. You'd have, a new temporary country created, and then that temporary country would then not have a truce with, their enemies, their liege's enemy. Say you're fighting against France, and you take a chunk out of France, and you want to go to war with France again, but you've got a truce, and you can't break this truce. Without massive penalties. If France has a civil war, their civil war wouldn't have a truce with you, so you just declare on the civil war. I guess that sort of alleviates that, because now it's still all the same country. It's an interesting way of doing it, of course. Yeah, it's definitely interesting. I guess it makes sense as well, because just because you've got a civil war, it doesn't mean that the main liege wouldn't Like, if somebody declared war on a part of your country that is currently fighting against you in a civil war, that liege is still not going to be like, yeah, nah, we don't actually care because they're fighting us, and therefore you taking control of this land that was previously, my own territory is totally fine just because we're at civil war. You know what? That's good. I like that. I like that it doesn't spit out a new temporary country. I think that's probably for the best. Yeah, I'm actually conflicted, but I think I'm ebbing on the side of being good with it. I could be convinced either way, honestly. Once one side emerges triumphant, they will enforce their demands. A victorious faction will enforce their ultimatum with some additional concessions thrown in, while a victorious liege will imprison all faction members and gain title revocation reasons against them. If a white peace is agreed to, things largely go back to the way they were, though the liege gains an imprisonment reason against all of the rebels. Actually, imprisoning the rebels is another matter entirely, as failed imprisonment attempts can trigger another rebellion. So we've got a few different types of factions as well. 5 distinct types of factions, each of which has its own goals. So we've got the Independence faction. No, you don't need to explain that. Claimant faction, seeking to replace their liege with a new one. That's same as what we're used to. Liberty faction, seeking to reduce Karen authority. Populist faction, seeking to form a new realm of their religion and culture. So independence, but with religion and culture thrown in. And then the Peasant faction, seeking to pay fewer taxes to their liege. Is that really a civil war, or is that like just a peasant rebellion? I don't know. I guess it's kind of the same thing. Vassals only join the Independence faction if they feel like they do not belong in their liege's realm. This can be due to a variety of reasons, but generally boils down to a combination of 3 major factors: not being a de jure vassal of their liege, not sharing the liege's culture group, and their liege's hostility towards their liege. More on that in a future dev diary. As a result, independence factions tend to be clumpy, forming distinct regional blocks within a realm. That's good to know. Yeah, that's pretty good. Okay, so this seems to be the same screenshot as the one above. So we'll go and compare that in a moment, but we'll just have a look at this one first. All your rebellious vassals become independent. Tuscany becomes independent. Lombardy, Savoy, Lyon, yeah, normal. I guess Duchess Matilda was the faction leader. She would gain the renown. You would lose the renown. Declare defeat, white peace, enforce demands. There's also surrender. So if that is what it now looks like, obviously we can then sort of say, alright, this part here, where Venice is still part of your country. So, or it's not rebelling. So this is still owned by you, the Holy Roman Empire. And then the rebelling part is outlined in red. See, I'd be totally down with that. I think would look good if it wasn't such a garish block red. Some kind of glowing red line would look a little better. Sort of like when in Imperator you hover over, a thing that would highlight a region, or I guess EU4 would be a better example of that. When you're hovering over a region for an achievement, or up in the new update, and you hover over a region, it will outline it. It's got this little glowing red line. That would look great. This it's monochrome. Monochrome is sort of black and white though, but it's monocolor. It's got only one color. It's blocky. It's ugly. That I'm hoping is a part of the bit that's under development. Yeah, no, I can see this being changed, and I hope it is, because yeah, the map looks great, but this looks fucking ugly, honestly. All right, let's go back down. So, a screenshot of an ongoing independence war against the HRE, showing the clustering of rebels within Italy. And obviously they're all rebelling because they feel they should be their own country, because they're Italian, they're not, German. Claimant factions, on the other hand, are all about opinion. Vassals who personally dislike their liege, while still feeling like they belong to their liege's realm, will favour this type of faction. Of course, claimant factions are also an area where opportunistic vassals can push to acquire titles for themselves or their relatives. The Liberty faction is the place for vassals who are almost happy with the current state of affairs. They want to lower either the realm's crown authority laws or their obligations to their liege, and are typically the easiest faction to manage. Finally, we've got the populist and peasant factions. They're special in that they are not created by unhappy vassals. Instead, they're created by unhappy counties. Aha, so populist is less like independence, because independence is led by, your nobles, your rulers, basically. This is all about how unhappy, how much unrest there is in various places, and one of them is you tax us too hard, and the other one is wrong culture or religion. Makes sense. And naturally they're going to use the Kurds as the example. A little bit on the nose there, maybe. But we've got the Kurdish apostolic populists. Their military power 142%, the discontents at 73. It's 8 members. I guess that might be 8 counties rather than 8 lords, perhaps. Then we've got the peasant rabble, with the same kind of stuff. And then I guess these are the counties that are going to rebel. Love it. Fantastic. Screenshot of the faction tab showing an active Kurdish apostolic populist faction and a peasant rabble faction. Much like vassals, counties have an opinion of their holder which is influenced by culture, religion, events, and war. When the opinion of a county drops too low, they'll join one of these 2 factions. Like the other factions, if these factions gain enough discontent, they'll send an ultimatum and will revolt if the ultimatum is refused. This completely replaces the random province revolt chance that existed in CK2. Gone are the days of Duke McPeasantface has declared the 19th Orthodox uprising on you. You know what? I'm sold. I'm already sold. Because this, the fact that they're taking the piss out of it shows that, they're totally aware that it was complete arse. So, yeah, 100% on board with this system of rebellion rather than the absolute garbage one that was in CK2. Populist factions are the more dangerous type of county faction and form when counties wish to be governed by a ruler of their own culture and or religion. While populist factions are created by and primarily consist of counties, sympathetic vassals in your realm may also pledge loyalty to their cause. That's interesting. A successful populist revolt will cause all member counties and vassals to break away and form a new realm. So I was thinking when I started reading this, okay, that's interesting. If they wish to be governed by a ruler of their own culture and or religion. So what about if you would put somebody of their culture and religion as their duke? Would that sort of solve it? But then sympathetic vassals in your realm may also pledge loyalty to their cause. So that could be the duke you put in place. And then I guess that would probably turn into an independence faction instead of a populist one. Which of those is more dangerous? I don't know. But I guess that could be, if you have the duke at a high enough opinion, maybe he's married into your dynasty, then perhaps you might get away with doing this as a bit of a way around the populist faction. Who knows? A successful populist revolt will cause all member counties and vassals to break away and form a new realm. While an independence faction causes all members to split off into their own separate realms, a populist faction will create a single realm with all members united under one ruler. That's interesting. So that revolt that we saw earlier, this wouldn't all be one country called, I guess, Italy. They would all be their own individual little countries, which then sort of makes me think that populists are a lot more dangerous, because I would much rather fight lots of little small guys than one really big guy. If this all split off into Italy, that would be a fairly significant country to fight, especially as you'd only be able to fight, this is a claim on the duchy of this place, so I can go to war with the entirety of Italy for one duchy. And then you wait for the truce, and then you go for the next duchy, etc., etc. Whereas if if they're splitting off into their own individual ones, you can attack them individually, and you'd be all right that way. Interesting, very interesting. Okay. A popular faction will always create a single realm with all members united under one ruler. That ruler will always share the faction's culture and religion, and as a hero of the Liberation War, there will almost always be a competent commander. In addition, a successful populist faction will automatically usurp or create an appropriate title for their leader to hold, which can even generate new kingdom tier titles in certain circumstances. Like Jutborg. Jutterborg, I don't know. Utterbog, yep, fair enough. A split off with HRA by a successful Polabian ruler revolt. This annoys me. This here should be Utterbog. This should be Utterbogian. All of this is taken together means that any realm formed by a popular revolt will end up being a formidable foe that likely has several de jure claims on its neighbours. This can substantially alter the balance of power in your region, even if you weren't the initial faction target. So if your neighbour has a popular revolt, you've now got a very hostile new kingdom that is actually kind of powerful, that's got a very competent ruler right on your doorstep, and you've now got to deal with your neighbor's problems, which that could throw many spanners into many works. On the other hand, Peasant Rabble are the simplest and least dangerous type of faction. Unlike all of the factions, there's no minimum military power requirement for the Peasant Rabble to revolt, and its discontent will always tick upwards at a constant rate. While the Rabble inevitably revolt, they will almost certainly be weaker than the liege they are targeting, but don't let that lull you into a false sense of security. Every time the Pet Rabble's forces occupy a county, all of that county's levies will immediately join them. What started out as a minor uprising can quickly balloon out of control if left unchecked. So basically, it's the Spartacus revolt. The servile rebellions in Rome. Luckily, their only demands are to pay reduced taxes and provide fewer levies to their liege, which is an annoying, if manageable, setback. So, deal with the rabble early, or the rabble will grow. I will say, all seems a little bit iffy. I can imagine some or even most would join, but all of them, like every single levy, not a single man in that rabble or in that levy thinks that, peasant rabble, I'm not on board with this. I kind of don't want to rebel. We're just gonna get crushed. It's not gonna work. I'm gonna stay home. Not a single one decided not to join. Iffy. So, faction management. So as a ruler, how do you manage all these factions? Well, there are several ways. For starters, any alliances you've made with your vassals will prevent them from joining a faction against you. This makes arranged marriages within your realm valuable, even if you don't benefit as much militarily as you would from foreign marriage. Okay, so going back to that scenario that I invented, where you put you put the culture and religion ruler person in charge of the place that's going to have a populist revolt. They just marry them, and then they won't turn it into an independence revolt, I guess. Maybe, I don't know. Adding to this, any vassals you have a hook on will be unable to join a faction against you, whether that hook is due to them owing you a favour or due to blackmail. You can also attempt to intimidate vassals away from their factions, as high dread will lower their willingness to be in one. If the threat of imprisonment and torture doesn't work, actual imprisonment will. Vassals in your dungeons cannot be part of any faction. Just be careful, as an unjust imprisonment attempt may provoke a powerful faction into revolting early, regardless of their discontent. Alright, lovely. So you can try and imprison someone, you gain dread for imprisoning them. Imprison Count Joffret. It's almost Joffrey, so I'm totally in favor of it. Yeah, tyranny though, which sucks. You don't want tyranny. A screenshot warning the player that imprisoning a vessel may trigger a faction revolt. Incite the independence faction to revolt. Yeah, I guess it makes sense. Finally, if all else fails, you can actually address the grievances your vassals have with you. Vassals who are happy enough will never join any kind of faction, which means improving their opinion of you and fixing structural issues in your realm will ensure that nobody challenges your rule. That's all for this week, but I have an extra special treat in store for you next time when we finally begin diving into how religion works in CK3. Lovely, finally. I'm looking forward to that. Blooper Reel, the extremely popular revolt. Very early on in CK3's development, I started looking into ways to make popular revolts more challenging. No matter how large a revolt got, their forces would always be spread out across all their member counties, making it trivial to pick off their armies one at a time. To help remedy this, instead of letting each county spawn its own army, I made it so each duchy would spawn a single army based on its combined military power of all faction counties inside of it. However, I made a mistake. Instead of adding up the military power of all counties in a duchy, I accidentally added up all the military power of all counties in the world, per duchy. Ah, yeah, well that's certainly a revolt that you might not be able to deal with. Yeah, no, I don't think you're going to win that one. What's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8? 8 stacks of 1.13 million. Yeah, no, I think you might. Yeah, 8.8 million people. That's you're not going to have a good time with that. It turns out that no matter how many knights you have or how good of a commander you are, 8.8 million angry peasants will overwhelm you in battle every time. You can understand that. You totally understand that. So now moving on to the forum, see if there is any. That's not what I want to do, but that looks cool. Is there any dev responses? Do it this way so it does it. There we go. Ah, beautiful. There's some dev responses now. Aren't hooks becoming too much of a universal cure for every problem a ruler could have? I mean, I guess kind of would it not be accurate to say that, you know, if you can blackmail somebody with, well, I'll tell the world that you are a baby eater. I mean, they're going to fall in line pretty hard. Why should hooks prevent someone from joining a faction? Hooks do take some effort generally to get if you want them on a specific person, and it makes a good amount of sense, to me at least, that a vassal is not going to want to piss you off by joining a faction if you blackmail them about all those murders they committed and threaten to reveal it to the world. Some hooks should allow faction joining, and some shouldn't, I think. Small hooks, like I'm pretty sure you can get hooks for like really minor things that aren't really that important. Shouldn't really stop you from joining a faction. Can a duke or count join a peasant revolt against their liege to use it to their own advantage? Landed vassals who share a faith with a populist faction may join it. If the populist revolt succeeds, they'll become part of the new realm which split off their former liege's realm. Landed characters can never, however, join the peasant rabbles. Okay. Are populist/peasant factions military power based on province development or something else? They're based on county military power. No, county military power is based off how many levies it provides to a holder, which is indirectly influenced by development. While this does seem to be more streamlined, less awkward system than what was present in CK2, it's disappointing to see that factions are still only single-issue entities and that they remain completely oppositional as well. Feels like a lot of interesting opportunities have been missed out here. We actually played around with this early in development, but it became clear that it was an unwieldy beast which quickly exceeded the resources we had for the system. Potentially an idea we can revisit in a future patch, though. Yeah, a Revolt DLC. Because I guess it does make sense, right? The Independence faction might be a bit more... You might be able to deal with them in other ways rather than just giving them independence. There might be... Look, you can't have independence, but I'll make these concessions to you. Or certain individuals within the independence faction might have their own agendas that you might want to play around with. Like, you could have a whole system there, I think. Is Blooper Reel possible to reproduce? It's been long since fixed, but it's possible to mod back in. Love it. Fantastic. About the populist and peasant faction, do you have to deal with only counties you have directly, meaning counties ruled by vassals can't join a faction against you? Populist factions always target the top liege in a realm regardless of who personally holds the county. Peasant rabble always targets the actual holder of the county. Do vassals who rule counties which have joined a faction automatically join the faction too? If no, what happens if the faction win and your vassal didn't join the faction? Did he lose his counties? So vassals join and leave factions independent of counties. It's possible for 100% of a vassal's holdings to be part of a populist faction without the vassal themselves being in the faction, and vice versa. Indeed, this is likely if the vassal and the counties have differing cultures or religions. And last, do vassals who didn't pledge the faction will join you to defeat a civil war or just lurking at you like in CK2? Non-faction vassals will not help you directly in civil wars, but will continue providing levies and taxes to you as normal. Maybe they should help you. Maybe you should be able to call them to arms. Raise the banners. Summon the elect accounts. But is this really all there is to be said about managing factions? Surely fixing the structural issues you mentioned has some actual mechanic behind it for addressing specific demands, because just getting your opinion up seems very lame in contrast to how much better the rest looks than CK2. Also, second and more important question, can you actually lower the discontent? We'll go back to that. Claimant faction and Liberty factions are primarily governed by opinion, but keeping your vassals even moderately happy will keep them out of both those factions. If you don't want to play a benevolent rule, a high dread value is just as effective at keeping them in line. By contrast, opinion and dread only have minor impact on independence and populist factions. These two are more concerned about structural problems within your realm and can generally be fixed by rearranging your liege to vassal hierarchy to achieve the following objectives. So you ensure that you are the rightful liege of all your direct vassals by creating or usurping appropriate duchy, kingdom, empire titles, or transferring them to someone who holds it. Ensure that your direct vassals share your religion and culture. It's less important if your religion is more tolerant, such as when playing in India. And ensuring that the holders of individual counties share a culture and or faith with those counties. I think there is some nuance behind it, but it's going to be... I think we're going to have to play around with the system before you can really say that it's weak or that there's not much to it. Because yeah, if it was just, oh, you get your opinion up with them and they'll never join a faction, that is kind of boring. But also I can see the argument for there being a whole mechanic behind it, like managing different faction members with a fancy new UI screen, and just like there could be something interesting done there. Second question, can you lower the discontent? If it's going up at different paces, then it's a modifiable timer. I don't want to have to put up with the rebellion timer just ticking constantly in the background. Discontent is mostly out of your control, but it won't be ticking up all the time. Only factions whose military power rivals your own can gain discontent. Okay, so that's good to know. You just need to improve your own military strength, and they won't rebel. Which is, I don't know if that's a little bit iffy as well. If you manage to reduce the power of the faction back below 80% discontent, it will start going down instead. Okay. Okay, fair enough. In addition, several events you can receive, especially with stewardship duty focus, give the option to reduce discontent in active factions or persuade faction members to leave them for a minimum of 10 years. So this is a big chunky amount of comments. In the dev diary, you said it was that the populist, why aren't they called nationalists or something along those lines? Well, it's fairly simple why they're not called nationalists. It's called modern politics. And I'm not saying that as a, paradox or doing modern politics and therefore that's why they're ruining the whatever. Nationalism wasn't even a fucking thing in the times of CK2. It just straight up wasn't. Nationalism was like created post-Napoleon, or during Napoleonic times. So yeah, no, I don't think. I mean, populist sort of doesn't work either, but I don't think nationalist works at all. I don't know what the right word would be, but yeah. You said that the populist faction's new realm get a fancy generated character. Is that always the case? I think that if the faction has any landed character as a member, it would be much more interesting to have him, or the most powerful one, become the ruler, since it's a familiar face. Nationalism as a concept didn't really exist in our time period. Yep, that's what I said. And the populist faction is somewhat different in that regard. It's not necessarily about unifying all cultural peoples into a single realm, but rather about a group of disgruntled peasants being unhappy with a foreign or infidel rulership and deciding to do something about it. They don't particularly care about making a single unified realm for all culture or religion. They just want to change their own situation. We initially toyed with letting landed characters become leaders of the populist faction and the eventual rulers of the Splinter Realm, but it ended up causing a myriad of problems as landed characters make and break alliances, join new factions, gain and lose hooks, and ultimately create way less edge cases than we could possibly reasonably account for. However, if an existing unlanded claimant is floating around in the character pool somewhere, for example, a displaced king of Castile, if the Umayyads manage to subjugate all of Spain, they'll become the populist leader instead of having the game generate a new one. That I like. That's good. That's good to see. What's the stance of populist factions against other realms? Would it be possible to interact with them if you're the ruler of the religion and culture? It's a very logical and frustrating situation in CK2, was to invade the Umayyads in Spain as the Kingdom of Asturias, be winning a fight against all the odds, and suddenly have a Visigothic Catholic rebellion against the Umayyads spawn top of your armies and destroy them. Yeah, that always sucked. It's like, oh, we're going into war to liberate the Christians for Christendom, yay. And then you have a bunch of Christians fighting you because they're also revolting, just from within rather than, an invasion. I completely understand what you're saying, but unfortunately the realities of our warfare system require all parties in competing wars to be hostile to each other. Otherwise, you can end up in an extremely frustrating situation where, as Asturias, you've occupied half the Umayyads' territory, the Catholic rebellion has occupied the other half, and neither of you can earn enough war score to actually win the war. Well, in fairness, change your warfare system then, because I agree with Kukumaro there, like a lot. Can I use a hook to persuade a fellow vassal to join my faction? Yes, good. But does it, even though it's a form of faction now, what will prevent it from forming again? I think he's talking about the populists. Will there be some kind of exhaustion in counties to prevent endless rebellions? Crushing a peasant or populist rebellion will give all counties in a faction a substantial opinion boost of their holder for 10 years, which heavily disincentivizes them from creating or joining new factions. It gives you time to address what problems were making the counties unhappy in the first place, including converting their culture or religion to yours, if that's how you want to solve it. May have missed something, but I couldn't see anything saying that multiple populist factions are possible. Does this mean that if there's a populist Muslim faction around, no populist Christian faction can form? Multiples can conform at the same time. The AI generally prefers to join existing ones. Well, only ever be one independence, liberty, and peasant rabble faction at a time, though. I don't know if I agree with peasant rabble being, only one, because if you've got a really, Europe-spanning empire, for example, the peasants in France are not going to be talking to the peasants in fucking Sweden, like, okay, we need to rebel at the same time, or anything like that. They don't give a fuck about each other. They don't even know each other exist. They don't know that there's a peasant rebellion going on in Sweden when you're in France. You're just going to rebel when you feel that you're strong enough. Like, I mean, yeah, I don't agree with that. I really don't. No. I definitely don't agree with that. No. Nope. No. No. There should be more than one peasant rebel faction at once, I think. Can new rulers join the ongoing rebellion? Or if I keep being tyrannical towards my non-rebelling vassals during the rebellion, will they just start a second rebellion? So they will start a second rebellion. They won't join the first one. It's unfortunate as well, I think. That said, if factions will only revolt if they think they have a good chance of beating you in battle, having two factions revolting at once is generally a bad idea. Alright. So, successful populists can create always not existed or random realm, words. Or also currently established, for example, King of France hold Duchy of Normandy as a secondary Normandy populist want his own local ruler. Populist factions prefer to usurp an appropriate existing title if possible. For example, again, if we're going back to the Umayyads, if they conquer all of Spain and lose to a Castilian Catholic revolt, the new king will take the title of King of Castile, either usurping it from the Umayyads or creating it if it's been destroyed. Only if that's not possible will they generate a new dynamic revolt title, which will be named after the most powerful county in the faction. Will foreign powers have the ability to influence a faction civil war? No. Apparently there's an excellent idea here. The encouraged dissent council task in CK2 was pretty limited to a single county, and I can only give so many gifts to rebels while they stockpile it for their ransom. Or maybe have your spy master be able to find out rebel factions and their dissent, so you have the perfect time to strike. One famous example is how Philip Augustus encouraged Hal and Richard's rebellions against Henry II, why Joffrey died from an injury during a tournament on one such diplo mission. I dislike watching independence factions get put down by a rival that I'd like to see humbled. Yeah, do it. I want to see it in a future patch, for sure. For sure. Well, that is the dev diary then, and some interesting stuff in there. Certainly some interesting stuff. Some things that I think are less amazing than others, for sure. There are some things in there that I'm thinking could certainly be improved, or, you know, a little bit disappointed in certain aspects of what we've seen. But yeah, you know what? I want to hear your opinions, so leave them in the comment section below. Let me know what you think. If you liked the video, maybe hit the like button. If you want to keep up to date with all CK3 news and updates, hit the subscribe button. And yeah, I will see you next week for another Dev Diary number 20. It's going to be a good one, hopefully. I have no idea if it's going to be a good one. I'm just hoping, really. Anyway, I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.